Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 2 of the Spartan Shadows Podcast. I'm Chris, one of your co-hosts here. Today we are going to be breaking down the first football game of the season. Yes, football is upon us. It's football week, and Friday night under the lights, Florida Atlantic will be coming to Spartan Stadium for the first game of the year. And Zach, Em, and I, we're going to break it down for you. I think give you some thoughts and insight on the game and get you primed for kickoff. So welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the tuning in on the first episode that we just posted. We appreciate it. And guys, how you doing today?
Good. Excited.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited for this matchup. I think it is favorable for MSU. This isn't the FAU of 3-4 years ago, but they still have some threats. But this is not the breakout 10-win team we saw. I think 9-10 win team we saw a couple years ago.
Yeah, I'm excited to get started too with the football season. A lot of excitement. We kind of touched on that last episode with the new coaching staff. Just to get everybody ready for that game time, 7:00 on Friday at Spartan Stadium. For those watching at home, that's going to be on Big Ten Network. Right now, the line, depending on what site you use, looks like it's roughly about 13.5, MSU being the favorite. That's what I can see on BetMGM in FanDuel. So that's kind of where it's about hovering. It opened at MSU being an 11-point favorite, so money has kind of slid over to MSU's side. I think Aiden Childs' comments had a little bit to do with that, which is crazy, but here we are, 13.5-point favorites. The over-under is set at 47.5 for those keeping track of that. And we'll open up with some thoughts on the game. I'll kick it out to the guys quickly. For me, I know Florida Atlantic's welcoming in a new quarterback. Cam Fancher is expected to be the starter this year, and so battle of two new quarterbacks, and I'm kind of excited. I think we match up pretty well. I'll let the guys kind of dive into that first, and then we'll go from there. But Zach, you want to kick us off with some thoughts on the game?
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, MSU hits the over on that 13.5. I believe in yesterday's 4 big games, no team hit the over on that spread. I believe the favorites on every single game, one either lost the game completely or didn't win by the margin that they should win. So hopefully it's not that close. Knowing Michigan State, though, kind of the trend it has been in the last few years, or just Michigan State in general, it's going to probably be one of those games that's going to come down to the end where it's like Michigan State, well, hopefully will be kind of in control for like the whole game. Like it never really felt like they were going to lose the game, but then maybe scores like a late touchdown to maybe hit the over there or just kind of put it away at the end. But a little bit about this FAU team. They're in a rebuild very much like Michigan State is. They're in the second year of Tom Herman. Went 4-8 last year. If the name Tom Herman sounds familiar, former Texas coach, got fired over at Texas, never really kind of did about as good as you want as in Texas. Took a little bit of time off, went to the NFL, and now is back in college football. This is a pretty new team since Tom Herman took over. They got 21 new transfers coming in this year. 35 players actually left, so it's not like a lot of these players are kind of returning from last year. And they have a couple of guys that left that were really impactful, like LaJonte Wester, the wide receiver last year. He ended up actually going to Colorado to play with Deion Sanders, and he's kind of the punt returner of last year as well. So this is a team that, again, is kind of in the rebuild. Offensively, we'll talk a little bit more about this team. Defensively, we will as well. But yeah, this is a team that is going to look brand new, honestly. And under Tom Herman, their schedule might lead to a bowl, possibly, because their schedule is pretty light compared to like the rest of the AAC. But again, this is going to be a team that offensively might struggle a little bit. Defensively is where they're going to probably rely on this season, I think, rely on in this game. Because defensively, pretty solid last year. Offensively, new offense. Go into that a little bit later, but what are you thinking, Emmett?
I'm feeling pretty good about the matchup. Obviously, this is one of those quote unquote bye games. So Michigan State favored by almost 2 touchdowns as they should be. Uh, but I wouldn't overlook this team. Well, Tom Herman was also the offensive coordinator at Ohio State from 2012 to 2014, so he has a career record of, I believe, 1-2 against the Spartans, or 1-1. So he has faced some of the best Spartan teams of past, so he knows what it's like to see Michigan State team working, but the last time he faced them was 2014, that game under the lights in East Lansing, and we know how that one went. So this is obviously not the same talent level as 2014 Ohio State, but I don't think the Spartans could tread lightly. One main matchup I'm looking at is the quarterback play. Aiden Child, in his limited snaps last year, looked really good, did not have a collegiate turnover, and meanwhile, the Cam Fancher, he was number 2 in the Sun Belt in interceptions last year. He's thrown 17 picks over the last 2 years, including 11 in 2023. So that is something to watch if the Spartan defense can get after him and cause some turnovers.
Yeah, you really got to look at, for me, the offensive line for FAU is a little inexperienced, starting some younger players. Hopefully, defensively, we're able to take advantage of that. Like we said, Florida Atlantic, its defense is a little bit more established than the offense. They do have some talent at multiple positions, so they can surprise you. But hopefully, with the revamped secondary and then our kind of more experienced defensive line players, Maverick Hansen, some of the guys up the middle can really put some pressure on the Florida Atlantic offensive line and kind of make Cam Fancher be a little forced into making quick decisions. May lead to some turnovers there. Obviously, Tom Herman is familiar with East Lansing and playing here and knows what it's like to play here. So that helps. It's not a team that is, new to coming up here. I know they were in the Sun Belt formerly, and we don't always see a lot of Sun Belt teams come up here, but now they're in the AAC, and they've got a pretty known head coach who's got some big school experience. So that only helps Florida Atlantic. I think they definitely shouldn't be overlooked, like you said. As far as the spread with the 13.5, I totally agree with what Zach said. I could see late backdoor cover if you're Florida Atlantic, kind of MSU maybe controlling the game for most of the game and never really being in trouble as far as worried about losing per se, but then fourth quarter, a couple minutes left, you see a late touchdown given up, and then all of a sudden they're only down 10, and MSU doesn't cover the spread. That's the MSU we're all comfortable with nowadays. Unfortunately, we don't seem to ever really put teams away. I'm hoping the new coaching staff will achieve that. That's something even dating back to the Mark D'Antonio era. It was never one to put a team away and keep your foot on the gas unless we were up on Michigan, because then of course we gotta keep the foot on the gas against Michigan. But other than that, we would to a fault let teams hang around, and I'm hoping the new coaching staff maybe doesn't have that same mentality. Maybe I'm not saying go run up the score, but maybe don't make us sweat all the way through a full 4 quarters every game. That would be nice. I'm excited to watch. We kind of touched on it in the first episode, but I'm excited to watch our offense. There's so many new pieces on it. Of course, Aiden Childs, he seems to be calm, cool, collected, confident, ready to lead the offense. The wide receiver group is a group specifically I think may be able to have some success in this game. Obviously, I mentioned Nick Marsh last episode. I think Nick Marsh is going to be a great player. He is a freshman. It may not be all at once. He's got to get some reps in. But returning Antonio Gates Jr., Montorie Foster seems to be okay after his injury. Of course, I haven't heard officially if he's going to play yet, but he seemed to be trending in the right direction, hopefully. So we have some guys that can make a difference, and hopefully they'll be able to exploit some matchups on that end of the ball.
Yeah, and the both of you kind of mentioned two of the main groups that FAU really struggled in last year. You look at last year, how they did. Offensive line was not very good last year, and that was kind of part of the reason why that offense wasn't good. They were not able to keep possession of the ball last year at all on offense. They only averaged 27.2 seconds per game, which was almost last in the country last year. So time of possession wasn't very good. They weren't very good at not turning over the ball. That's one thing that FAU is really going to have to focus on this year. And you have Cam Fancher, I believe Emmett was talking a little bit about him, how he had some turnover issues last year. Last year he threw for 2,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, 11 interceptions at Marshall. If Marshall sounds familiar to some fans, that's because head coach Charles Huff was actually, his name was brought up a little bit for that Michigan State job early on until kind of Marshall started struggling later on. So Charles Huff, a name that should kind of bring some familiarity to fans, but you have Cam Fancher coming over. He's actually bringing one of his top receivers over at Marshall with him, which is Caleb Combs. He had 39 receptions for 310 yards, 2 touchdowns last year, which only averaged about like 7.9 catches average for catches, which was one of the lower points on this Marshall team. But outside of that, you really look at this offense. They really don't have very many returning wide receivers from last year's team. You don't have a starting quarterback from last year's team. Like Chris was talking about, that offensive line just isn't really that experienced, honestly. You look at the running back room as well. A lot of their leading running backs last year is not here anymore. So if you're looking for one thing on this FAU team that I think Michigan State could hopefully take advantage of, is this offense, is being able to get off the field, forcing turnovers. And that's one thing that Michigan State struggled with last year, especially defensively in the secondary, was forcing interceptions. And you have a quarterback that has issues throwing interceptions. You have wide receivers in this room that, one, a lot of them don't have that chemistry with a starting quarterback, and two, they don't really have that experience. And then the offensive line, again, was one of their weakest points last year. So you really look at this offense, and there's issues here that this offense needs to fix. Now, it is a new year, and you're looking at what they did last year. Guess what? Offense can quickly turn over, and that's what the transfer portal is about. I'm not saying this offense is not going to be good, but if you look at what they did last year, this offense struggled mightily, and this offense, if they don't get better, this defense can take advantage of this offense. Now, on the opposite side, you got FAU. What's one of their biggest bright points of last year was their defense. They only allowed 25.5 points last year, which was top 60 in the country, which is amazing for an offense that basically didn't have very much possession of last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of just piggyback, sorry, Emmett, but just to piggyback off the last year statistics, they went 4-8 last year. 4 wins were against Charlotte, South Florida, Tulsa, and Monmouth. They got blown out by Clemson. They lost at Illinois as far as the lone Big Ten team they played. They only played one ranked team, and that was against Tulane at the end of the year, and they lost 24-8. Did have a loss at home against Ohio, Mac School, Ohio. And so, like Zach pointed out, offense struggling. You're losing your starting quarterback. You're losing potentially your biggest impact player in the running back position. The hope is, if you're a Florida Atlantic fan, that you upgraded with Cam Fancher and his receiver coming over and some other pieces. That's part of what happens in the transfer portal era. Even if you lose players, you can upgrade. I mean, look at us, where we also went, not great last year, only had 4 wins, and we're talking about Aiden Childs being exponentially better and pieces coming over to make us exponentially better. And So that can happen. So I'm not saying they're a team that should be taken lightly, but a lot of major pieces missing, and they didn't have the best record last year to kind of show off that. It's not like the level of competition was the toughest to maybe explain why they were not doing the best on offense. This year also is not looking great for strength of schedule wise, so it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing overall this year. MSU is the only Big Ten team they're playing, it looks like. In the non-con, they're also playing Army. It looks like they have Florida International, but then other than that, it's UConn and some other, regular American teams that you see them maxed up in the non-conference or in the conference schedule. So it'll be interesting to see how they fare. But yeah, I hate to keep talking about last year, but there were some struggles last year, and I'm not sure they improved in some of those areas.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how much they've improved. One main matchup I'm looking for, and I will be looking for on Friday night, is how their tight ends fare against our linebackers. Obviously, linebacker was a big emphasis in the portal, with us landing Jordan Turner from Wisconsin, Samaj Bridgman from Michigan, and their tight end room is inexperienced, to say the least. Their top two tight ends, according to a depth chart projection, are Zeke Moore, who is a true sophomore, I believe, was a freshman last year, had like 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then their projected tight end 2 is Khalil Brantley, a former Miami player. This is his second year at Florida Atlantic. He only had 35 yards last year, so if Zeke Moore or Khalil Brantley look like superstars against us on Friday night, that might be a cause for concern and cause me to ask, how does the pass defense look against them? Because obviously we got torched, our linebacking core. I remember everyone was bashing players like Cal Halladay and the like for pass coverage. I don't believe Pro Football Analytics disagreed with the take that Halladay struggled in coverage last year.
Yeah, it's one point our linebacking core was accused of last year is, not being able to cover the passing downs and the passing routes. We were decent against the run. I mentioned that last episode, where especially towards the end of the year we were pretty decent at stopping the run overall as a defense, but obviously the passing defense was a little suspect at times. That's what led to revamping the linebacking core in the secondary as well. The two tight ends you mentioned, Emmett, that is an interesting matchup to me too, because neither one of them are the new age, towering tight end, the big bodied guys that are super athletic that can go out and either run past you or out jump you. Both of them both Zeke and Khalil are 6'2" from what I can tell, and decent athleticism on both of their accounts, but they're not coming out. They're not throwing out guys that are 6'6", 6'5", that are towering over the linebacking core in the secondary. So you see that so often nowadays in modern college football and even the NFL too. You try to get the most dynamic athlete that can jump higher and is 3-4 inches taller than the guy that's going to be covering on him, and it leads to mismatches. You're not going to have that here. So hopefully the linebackers can take advantage of that.
And that's why you bring in a guy like Wayne Matthews, is you kind of address a need where last year you struggled pass coverage at the linebacker position, but then you bring in a guy like Wayne Matthews that was one of the best linebackers in coverage. So hopefully he should help there. But like you guys are saying, like we've talked about already, FAU has basically a completely new offense here. So don't necessarily know exactly what we're going to get, but if history repeats itself, they might struggle again this year. But we go from one side of the ball to the other side of the ball. Defensively, FAU is a very experienced team. They have 8 starters returning from last year. One area that they were having issues with last year is that secondary. So I think, Chris, you're talking about wide receivers a little bit. Hopefully Michigan State can take advantage of the secondary, but I think FAU and Tom Herman realized that this secondary was an issue last year because they ended up bringing over to transfers, you got Kaiser Brown from Maine and Philip Dunham from Indiana in the defensive back room. You also have two other defensive back ends, Jaden Williams and B.D. Hill, that is experienced as well. Linebacker Jackson Ambush, he's kind of the main linebacker of this defense as well as returning too. So they got some guys coming back on this defense. And one thing that was kind of, I don't want to say Scott Hazelton's specialty, but one thing that he tried to do was kind of do this don't bend but don't break defense. And that's what FAU did last year. And they were able to be pretty successful, 94th in the country. But like I was saying earlier, only 25.5 points last year all time in the country, top 16 in the country, like I was saying earlier. And this is where I kind of want to go into the conversation a little bit about Michigan State offensively and Brian Lindgren, because I've been seeing quite a bit of chatter or conversation going on Twitter between Oregon State fans and Michigan State fans just saying, hey, just wait until you see this Brian Lindgren's offense. Like, and I look and I'm like, Oregon State averaged like 35 points a game last year. I understand there's a lot of college teams, college fans that don't necessarily love either the offense or defensive coordinator. I don't think there's a lot of fan bases that love both. I think there's always a fan base that's saying, hey, we can kind of get better in one or the other. But we're coming off of Jay Johnson. And I don't want to say things can't get any worse, but coming off of a season that you average a little over 15 points, if you can score like 3, 4, 5 touchdowns, like if we can put up like 28, 35 points this game against FAU, I think Michigan State fans are going to be happy, because this FAU team, while we're talking about it, did struggle last year. This isn't your like Central, this isn't your Western. Like, I think this is a better team than those teams are, and not taking a shot at those teams, because guess what, they're in-state teams. But in my opinion, there's difference between the MAC and the AAC. And while this is a rebuild, I think this defense is going to be pretty solid. So if Michigan State can put up a good offensive performance, maybe fans will kind of back off of Lindgren a little bit, unlike Jay Johnson, which it seems like outside of kind of his quote-unquote planned opening drives of every single game, he just wasn't good. I don't know why. He was really good at these like organized drives the first drive of every game. Outside of that, he was awful. So as long as Lindgren can improve on that and score more than 15 points a game, I think fans are going to be a little happy. Do I think 16, 17, 18 points a game will make fans happy? No, but if they can average like mid-20s, high 20s this year, I think that's a dramatic improvement. That starts here against a pretty solid FAU defense.
Yeah, I agree that their defense on paper looks to be a good test, especially offensive line. Their projected starters are all junior, senior range on the D-line. So considering our offensive line, I did some more research after our first podcast, and only 4 of our returning players took snaps at the FBS level last year. Luke Newman also did play against Army, so you can make an argument for 5. But yeah, with Gavin Brocious and Stanton Ramil missing the entire year for injury, you only have 5 players who've played against FBS competition. So it's going to be a good test for our offensive line for the first time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we touched on that in the last episode too. Offensive line depth, I think, is a big issue for us, all 3 of us. We mentioned it. It can cause a team that we think could be really successful offensively to maybe falter at times, because if someone gets hurt, starter goes down, we don't necessarily have the pieces and experience that can step in and maybe make it a smooth transition. So it'll be interesting to see. And while I think that Florida Atlantic's defense is good enough to cause MSU some problems, I'd like to think, our offensive line at full go, especially with Tanner Miller being right up the middle, I think we should have some success there. I think Jack Velling and Brendan Parachek, too, are going to help out a lot. Blocking, of course, but I think Aiden's relationship with Jack Velling is going to be really key this season in general, but against a team like Florida Atlantic, because I think Jack's dynamic enough to slip out and be that outlet, that safety net for the quarterback. And if Aiden unfortunately does have to escape the pocket and escape pressure, he can find Jack and maybe take advantage of some mismatches and hopefully, get out of some trouble. Also, that being said, Aiden's legs, I think, are another dynamic we're not used to. So I hope it's not just MSU fans kind of overhyping somebody who can be mobile. We haven't had necessarily a quarterback who can do that since really Brian Lewerke. And Brian Lewerke, as great as he wasn't exactly known for his scrambling ability. He could do it. He could, help out and escape and gain some yards when he could. I think that TD against Michigan in 2017 speaks for itself. But Aiden, I think, is even more of a dynamic athlete than that, obviously, and I think really could be a difference maker against teams like Florida Atlantic, who may not be used to facing a quarterback of that athleticism dynamic.
Yeah, Cam Fancher, speaking of Aiden, you talked about, Chris, how he's able to get out of the pocket, how he's able to run. Cam Fancher can do that a little bit, so I'm interested to see how the defense holds up against a quarterback that can run a little bit as well. I do expect that even though this offense from FAU struggled last year, I do expect that maybe there might be some blown coverages or something defensively that Michigan State maybe struggles in on game one, because again, this is a brand new scheme for Michigan State under Joe Rossi. It's always hard, kind of the first couple weeks, to kind of get down pat, but I think if Michigan State can avoid big gains against this defense, I think they have a real good chance of winning this game. And offensively, as long as you don't turn over the ball, you take care of the ball, you force a couple of turnovers, I think Michigan State should win this game. Would be kind of surprised if Michigan State loses this game, if they lose the turnover battle. I know the turnover battle was a huge thing under Mark D'Antonio. It seemed like every time we would win the turnover battle, I don't know the exact record it was, but it was some insane number. And I'm sure if you look at the history of any college football team, I'm sure if you win the turnover battle, I'm sure the win percentage is much, much higher than when you lose. So I don't think that's really some great grand scheme thing at all. But if this defense can cause turnovers, Aiden Childs takes care of the ball, I think Michigan State will be walking out on Friday night with a 1-0 victory and hopefully covering the spread as well. That's just my prediction, is I think Michigan State wins this game, and I think they actually win it rather comfortably. I'm thinking 28-13, 28-10, something like that.
One thing I was going to say, I don't think we really got a chance to expand to, another difference maker who I think might be able to help out in this game too, if the offense does have its moments of struggling. Jonathan Kim. I mean, he was a revelation last year for MSU's offense. And hey, when you have a kicker that can hit from 50 yards, that really shortens the field. And if you're not getting everything together, then hey, you only have to get it a few yards each drive, and you have a shot at a field goal. So. I think Jonathan Kim could be a difference maker all season. It's a thing you hope you don't have to rely on, but when you have it, sure nice. I know MSU fans have had some stressors with kicking the last few years. Matt Coughlin was great, but when he was dealing with injuries, it was hard to expect him to come out okay. And then since he's left, it's been adventurous, we'll say, and then Jonathan Kim seemed to really stabilize that. And as a Lions fan, I understand kicking woes of late too. So Jake Bates hopefully will have a Jonathan Kim-esque season and help me on both of my football fandoms. But it's something that's really helpful for an offense. So much like Zach, I feel pretty confident about this game. I'm going to go out and say MSU does win and cover the spread. I'll say I think the over in the game is going to hit too, so I'm gotta do some quick math here, but I think we're going to do final score 38-17.
Okay.
38-17. We'll do that.
You
I
can't
looked
forget
at
about Ryan Eckley either. Shout
Oh
out
yeah,
Ryan Eckley too, punter.
punter. We always seem to have a good punter.
Yeah, facts.
So, I for the ones that do partake in the online gambling in the sports betting. While we were talking, I did kind of look up a fun little parlay. If you're interested, I just kind of looked at it on DraftKings. If you were to combine MSU covering the spread with the over, you got plus 264 odds on your bet. So maybe worth it if you think the game's going to go similar to how I do. Maybe make a couple extra bucks on that. Responsibly, of course. We don't condone any unresponsible gambling. Just something to look at. But I do feel pretty confident about MSU's ability to hopefully start off the season fairly on a good note.
Yeah. My score prediction for this, I'm projecting 31-17. I think we're gonna have, like Zach said, we're breaking in a new defensive coordinator. I think we're gonna allow a blown coverage or two during the game. I believe 31-17 we still cover. So I think it's gonna be close. I think it's gonna be one of those, like you guys have said, they're gonna keep it close. It might be like, say, 14-17 at half in favor of us. But then we're gonna, once the talent and the depth chart starts to show, I think we are gonna pull away at the end. Maybe they get maybe they make it within one touchdown to make us nervous. But I think final 3 minutes or so we get a touchdown that sends the fans home happy or to the bars happy. So another thing that I am going to be watching during this game is our punt return battle, because we had Tyrell Henry at that position last year. He has moved on to Wisconsin. So I'm interested to see who our punt return will be. Probably, if I'm guessing, Alante Brown, the fifth-year senior Nebraska transfer. He was taking reps at kick return and was also returning punts during the spring game. But we could see a player, any of the freshmen. I've heard good things about Isaiah Johnson. I've also outside shot of someone like Austin Clay. I know he is a 3-star receiver from Ohio from last year. He's athletic. He's an athletic freak. I think he said like school record for steals in basketball. So I think he just has a lot of talent, a lot of fast movement, and could work his way out of trouble and might see the field early as either gunner or returner.
One thing you'll notice, too, with this staff, they like to recruit those dual sport athletes out of high school. And a lot of the recruiting stuff I've done for Shadows, you see the receivers and the running backs and, players coming in for visits. It's talked about they play wide receiver, they play corner, they play, basketball, they play track, they run a whole bunch of different events. They do all these different sports and play baseball, do multi-sport stuff. So I think that's going to be a theme each year. You're going to see recruits coming in each recruiting class that are definite studs at multi-sports and maybe had offers to do other things besides football, but chose football. And athleticism like that, something that really can be used in so many different ways in football. So it's nice to see. To mention the kick returning battle, like you said, Emmett, too. I don't know if they'd really want to use him on kick or punt returns because I think he's projected to do a lot offensively. Nick Marsh was a stud at doing that in high school. Yeah. He had a couple. Yeah, I was going to say against Belleville. I know he took him back. He had a lot of. Yeah, poor Emmett, but he did have a lot of success doing that in high school throughout his high school career, not just last year either. So I could see him being an option to maybe return the occasional punt or kick, kind of like maybe what Jaden Reed used to do occasionally. I know Alante Brown was kind of slated to do that last year, and he got hurt early, so that kind of threw a wrench in some plans. So I think he's more than capable of succeeding in that role. So he would be my pick to be the kick returner. It'd just be nice to see a reliable, athletic person to field those and maybe give us a chance to steal some yards.
Exactly, and I think it will be a fun battle to watch. I think it's been a little while since we've had that electric punt return, kick return. I know we had Jane Reed. Before him, you had Keyshawn Martin as well. But definitely looking forward to see who that next special team return is going to be. But before we kind of wrap it up here in the next minute or two, Kristen, you have something from a former player that you reached out to get his opinion on this game?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Zach. I know we all on Spartan Twitter and on social media like to joke about the Friday night opening the season, how different it is. I've always kind of enjoyed it because I prefer night games over anything. It's just that sense of getting hyped and build up and under the lights, and it was always a nice little outlet. Yeah, exactly. Get a full day of pre-gaming too. So for those in college that still partake in that, but
We drink
I reached out.
by the way.
Yeah, responsibly, of course. Yeah, responsibly anything. Don't go too crazy. At least until after the game. But I reached out to one of our friends of the show, friend of the website, former Michigan State tight end Matt Seibert. Seibert sent me a little DM and was talking about the feeling of Friday Night Lights and the first game of the year and how much fun. He said, in quote, Friday night home openers is really one of the most anticipated nights of the whole year. To me, it was always like Christmas Eve times 10. I was always so amped the day before, so he loves them. It's one of those parts of MSU that's kind of unique, I guess. Not everybody gets to do the opening night games, so I think the players do enjoy it. I know not everybody in the fan base does, but I think it's fun to get behind and set the weekend off right. If you succeed and win, that is, you can really start the weekend with a bang and have a fun, responsible weekend again. So. Just something to look into. And of course we thank Matt for the little side piece and side quote. If you want to keep in touch with what Matt was doing, a little shameless plug for the website here. I got to interview him a couple weeks ago. There's a couple articles out about his time at MSU and what he's done professionally in football afterwards and streaming nowadays and some other stuff. So if you guys are bored and want something to read, go check that out on the website, SpartanShadows.com.
One last thing also for all of us that I want to ask. So, who's going to be scoring the first Spartan touchdown of the year? Personally, as the one who's proposing this question, I'll go first. I'm going to guess Nate Carter. We saw during the spring game he had a 50-yard breakaway run with the ones-on-ones. So that offensive line has created push before. I could see us breaking one early.
Yeah, that's probably, if I had to put money on it, I would probably put it on Nate Carter. I'm going to go outside the box. I'm going to say Aiden Childs is going to score a rushing touchdown to start us off.
Scramble, okay.
And then I'm going wide receiver. If he's healthy, he plays. Actually, no, I'm going to switch it. Never mind. We are going different transfer. We're going Jack Vallian will be the one that scores first. Big fan of Jack Vallian. Maybe in the future, maybe if we get this big enough, maybe we can have him on. But yeah, big fan of Jack Vallian. Think he's going to score the first touchdown of this season.
That was going to be my other choice. If I didn't pick Aiden, I was going to be Jack. So I think the smart money's on Nate, but I love Jack. As a player, I think he's going to be. I'm excited for this year for him. So
I was going to go Montori faster at first. I do like Montori if he does play, but then I'm like, why not go with the tight end that led the country in touchdown receptions last year? So Jack Vallian.
Smart pick.
Safe bet right there.
Also, shout out to Coach Smith and the staff. We've gotten some updates on player injuries throughout the spring and summer. something we didn't always get from previous regimes. So if somehow this gets to you, Coach Smith, we always appreciate those. Lets the fan base calm down just a little bit. So that was nice. Hopefully Montori's good to go. I know he wants to be out there, and so hopefully he's ready to go for Friday. Obviously, if not, don't rush back. We'll need you this season. But yeah, it's exciting time. And I think that's all we really have for you guys today. I know the tentative plan is to get this out maybe midweek and have enough time for you guys to enjoy it before kickoff on Friday. And then next week we will be back with an episode kind of recapping the Florida Atlantic game and then getting you all set for week 2 and our first road game. Maryland, right, is the first one, I believe.
Yes, Maryland.
I get Maryland and Boston College confused on what order they're going in. But, yeah, we'll be at Maryland next week, and then to go after that back home against Prairie View, right? Yes.
Yep.
Prairie View.
Yeah, Prairie View, then
So,
BC.
Yep. So yeah, football season's here. We're gonna try to stick to that once a week, kind of recap football, and then maybe at the end of the episode hit any other news that comes out. Once basketball season kicks off or gets closer, we may do a little bit more and kind of do some basketball stuff. Hockey, of course, too. We want to try to keep as many as the sports and updates included. So we'll let you guys know of any schedule changes once they come out.
Yep, sounds good.
But yeah, so exciting stuff coming. And like Zach said last week, we're hoping to get some player interviews, some former player interviews, some other fun guests maybe lined up. We've already got some things in the works, so we'll do that. Make sure to follow us. I've linked all of our social pages in the YouTube descriptions and stuff like that. We're working on getting the Spotify and Apple audio feeds up. I got to work on that a little bit more. We were having some trouble. Forgive me, I'm new at a lot of this. So we appreciate your guys' patience as we're getting up and running. As I said before, any suggestions you, the viewers, may have, we have an email address linked. Shoot us an email, Spartan Shadows Podcast @gmail.com. We're on Twitter at MSU Shadows Pod, Facebook Spartan Shadows Podcast, Instagram Spartan Shadows Podcast, and then you'll see all of our personal pages. We like to throw things out as much as we can too. So give us all a follow on those if you so choose to. We really would appreciate it. We thank everybody for tuning in. Zach, any last words?
Just ready for Friday.
Yes, we're so close. We're almost here. So, guys, I appreciate you joining me. Listeners, I appreciate you joining us and letting us talk your ear off about football. We enjoy doing this a lot, so we really appreciate it. And we'll talk to everyone probably throughout the week. Thanks again, everybody, and go green.
Go Light.